Don't even know what time it is. Wow, silence. All right. I'm just gonna let some people in here. Everybody's popping in now. We're gonna get started in just a minute. Just some housekeeping items as we are getting started before we kick off tonight's final week of Ignite. Very excited about tonight's topic. If you can put your Zoom camera on, that would be amazing. It just boosts the energy. I've been in the office since about 8 a.m. this morning, so no lie, it's actually going to just help me boost my energy. I've been watching Phil Jones. I don't know if anybody knows who that is, but he wrote the book Exactly What to Say, and it was phenomenal. So yeah, if you can put your camera on, that would be great. It's also just way more engaging for all of us, right? And again, you can be, I don't care where you are, you can be in your, well, don't be in your car, that's dangerous. But at home, PJs, wherever, with the kids, at the park. Been on Zoom for long enough, seen it all. Sometimes too much. I'm glad somebody got that. Thank you. All right, well, let's go ahead. It is, as I click here and admit people in, let's go ahead and kick things off. And I want to actually start it by, let me just switch this around here. I just want to start out by, here's the thing. So many of you have been going through the last 6 weeks of Ignite, different instructors, different things you're learning, things you're implementing, things you're like, oh my God, I don't even know how to do that. And you're in your final week. By the way, congratulations. And I know some of you are just getting started. I know there's a few of you who are like brand new to Ignite, just getting started. Welcome. Here's a cool thing. What you're going to learn tonight doesn't take away your what you might have missed, because number one, they're all recorded. You can watch them on YouTube. Number two, they're coming back again in the fall. So when it pops back up again, you just take it again, right? Or take it for the first time. So I'd love to blow up the chat box right now. Okay. If you feel like raising your hand and come off of mute, that's awesome. But in the chat box, I'd like to just hear from everybody. Not so much a takeaway. I'd like to hear, what is something you have already implemented? What's one thing you've already like, oh my God, I already started doing that? Or it's on your like, oh my God, I'm doing that this week because I learned it last week. What is that one thing? In the process of organizing my workflow. Love that. Now, organizing workflow, like time management, that type of thing.
Kind of like organizing, A through Z of, the whole process of, what we do, how we do it, putting things together, such as presentations, daily routines, database, all of that. It's kind of that's what Ignite gave me, the picture of, what we're supposed to be doing, what does it look like, and, step by step, pretty much. So
Love that.
I'm doing.
Love that. Yeah. Now, I'd caution everybody on here. I love that you brought that up, because here's the thing, we have to, the more we get organized, number one, the better time management we have, and the better flow we have, the better experience we're providing people with, because we're organized and prepared. And be careful not to plan to plan. Everybody understand what that is, right? When you're like, okay, I'm going to organize this, to plan this, to organize this, to plan this before I can get started. So be careful not to continually think you have to make it perfect before you start. You kind of have to do it as you go, right? And perfect it along the way. Okay. I see in the chat box the word practice. Love that. I swear. I was on so for those just tuning in, I was on an all-day training event today with the world-renowned author and speaker, Phil M. Jones, who wrote the book Exactly What to Say, which, by the way, if you've never read that, I'm not big on plugging books, but I will plug that book all day long. It's called Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones. And he was saying on there, the time to practice what you're about to say, or the time to think about what you want to say, is not in the moment. Meaning, don't show up at that listing appointment or all of a sudden show up at the buyer strategy session, right? Or showing a house. And then in that moment thinking, oh, I wonder what I should say to this person. Right. All right. Growing my database and adding Smart Plan monthly neighborhood nurtures to it. Yes. Your database is your data bank. If you do not have one, this business is going to be very, very, very hard for you. And I say that because you're constantly going to be chasing. You're just going to be chasing, right? And always chasing. As opposed to just consistency and having things fly to you, right? The other thing with that is eventually you're going to grow your database so large that, I'm sorry, there is not one person out there in the entire world, if you think you are, text me, I'll challenge you, who can actually remember and manage anything more than maybe 50 people at max. Not using a database. We need something to keep us on task, something to remind us of things, send out things, etc. All right. And for those just tuning in, we were just sharing in the chat box or coming off of mute and sharing just something that you have implemented, a win, right? I'd love to hear a win that anybody's had so far. Before we dive in, putting together a buyer and listing guide. Love that. Love that. By the way, if you have not put together your guide, first of all, in Command, it's already put together for you. So if you haven't put together, what are you waiting for? It won't take you long because it's already done. You're just throwing your picture and name on it and your brokerage logo. Okay. And then clicking download. So if you have not done that, you have until before the end of June. How about that? Before the end of June, get that done. Just knock it out. Have it ready. All right. So let's open it up and let's talk a little bit about challenges then, right? So I'd love to hear, before we get into tonight's topic, what have been, we'll go wins and challenges. Any wins that you've had so far through Ignite, any challenges that maybe you want to, talk about for a quick second and talk some tips and tricks to hopefully overcome it.
For me, a lot of the wins have been all of the information that's been given. It's very helpful, very informative, and they're motivating because it allows you to think outside of the box to move forward. For me, the other side is allocating that time along with being consistent, technology-wise, lead-wise, all of that we have to do. That's the biggest challenge for me.
Allocating the time.
Yes.
Anyone else want to raise your hand and say allocating time is difficult? By the way, I'm going to assume that every single person with their camera off is just raising your hand right now, because whether you are full-time or dual career, that is one of the hardest things to do. Time, we all have the same amount of it, but allocating it, because we all do something, we all have different things going on, whether in life or job or whatever it is. Finding that balance is difficult, right? I will tell you this, I'm going to use the word master, but we don't actually master it. We just tweak it along the way. But when you really use your calendar, I don't care what kind of calendar you use. When you really use a calendar and you put in there, here's when I'm going to the dentist. Here's when I am at my other job. Here's when I have to have my dinner with friends. All right, going for margaritas. Here's my real estate time. and what I'm doing in it. When you can look at your calendar every week and and you can hand your calendar to a stranger, right? So when you can hand your calendar to anybody on this call who you don't know, except for through this little Brady Bunch square on the screen, right? And they can follow it to a T to know exactly what they're doing that week. That's the calendar you need, right? And that's when it starts getting easier to allocate your time. Because you open it up and you're like, oh, look, it's Monday, and at this time, I'm in Ignite. Or, hey, it's this time on Tuesday, and I'm texting 10 people. All right, I see staying on track, time blocking. Love these. Okay, so let's kick off tonight. We're getting to the close tonight. We're going to the closing table. Who's ready for that? Who's ready to bring buyer, seller, client all the way to settlement? Okay, I see 2 people. That is, oh, 3 people. Yes, okay, I'm going to talk to you. So, all right, good. There's a few more. I was about to say, does anybody like want business? All right. So listen, you got to bear with me. It's after 6. I've literally been in the office since 8 a.m. this morning. I might have had food. I don't even know. I don't remember. I think I might have had a 5-minute break. I'm not sure. So bear with me if I get a little, extra fun. We'll just call it that, right? All right. For those of you who don't know me, for new faces, hi, my name is Alana Hubert Katz. I am located in Maryland. I'm in the Maryland, DC area. I'm an agent. I love referrals. I have a whole team, Maryland, DC, Pennsylvania, Virginia. We can handle it. So, if you don't ask, by the way, you will never receive. So if you're not asking people who they know for referrals, you obviously don't want them. So I'm asking right now. I love them. I am head of a coaching department here, as well as a local and national trainer with Keller Williams University. And I am excited and all those emails that all of you get on Sundays and Mondays, that's from me. Nice. Ignite is kind of my baby. So let's kick this off. Final week, we are going to the closing table. So let's talk a little bit about that. What we're going to be talking about, wow, I have to move my Zoom boxes all over the place. So what we're going to be going through tonight is we're really going to focus on the timeline. When it goes under contract, what does it look like then? What happens? How do you get to the close? How does it fall through, right? We're going to talk about best practices as well as some things to help your clients with risk avoidance. Referrals, reviews, when to ask, how to get them, post-close follow-up, and then we'll wrap up the night in a pretty bow. Okay. So I'm going to give this disclaimer before we get started. Oh, Erica, is your hand raised or you just high-fiving me? I never know with these.
It was great. So I was just thanking you for the weekly emails. I really appreciate those.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comment.
You're welcome.
Okay. So let me ask this question to the room. This is a live question, meaning I am looking for someone to come off mute or put in the chat box the response. Okay. And that is, you go and you have a buyer or seller, and both parties. So we're gonna go with buyer right now. So all of you have a buyer. The seller agreed to the terms. Contracts were all signed, dated, and you are officially under contract. Okay, number one, congratulations. That's an awesome feeling, right? Getting to that point is not easy. Does it end there? Is your job done as agents?
No.
No. Deborah, I like how you said that. That was like a no.
You got a lot of work to do.
That is where the job begins, in my opinion.
Big work.
When it goes under contract, especially with a buyer, that is where the job begins. And the deadlines are real. And we're going to go through a timeline tonight, and I really hope you're taking notes. So here's my little disclaimer, and that is we have many, many, many states on this call. We have Canada on this call. We are all over the place. Every single location, every state, every country, etc., has different rules, has different contracts, has different items in the timeline that are needed. So what you're going to get tonight are best practices, strategies, tips, tricks, all that good stuff that are most frequently used around the nation at your personal location, at your Marcus Center. I would ask you, okay, so I love, for those of you who are on a call with me before, I did say this, for those of you who are new, I get to tell you, I don't teach a class without giving homework. Number one, if you take a training and don't walk away with something to implement, an action item to implement, what was the use of your time? Right? You need to implement something. So I like to call it homework. That, and also I have a degree in elementary education, and I just like to use it and give homework. So the homework assignment I'm going to give all of you is after tonight's class, set aside a time in your calendar, because if it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist, to find somebody at your Marcus Center, whether it is a top producing agent, whether it is your broker, if you have a coach, have it be your coach, right? And see if you can sit down with them for 15 minutes. You don't need a long time. And in the participant guide of Ignite, there's actually a timeline, an empty timeline that you can fill in. So tonight, you're going to be able to take notes on some of that timeline and screenshots and all that. But then I want you to sit with someone local, because every state is different, every location is different, and fill it in to a T for your location. That way, when you all have a brand new buyer tomorrow, and they're sitting across from you at that coffee shop, and they're like, well, what's the process? You not only know the process of showing homes and walking through houses, but now you have a clear understanding of how to get it to the ending, the end zone, we'll call it, right? Get to the goal line. All right. So start with the timeline. Ooh. So with the timeline, there are okay, we'll go to this. There are very specific deadlines. All right, so I'm going to by the way, I'm going to share some true stories. These are all stories of agents I have worked with over the years. These are all stories of agents who are around multiple different Keller Williams offices, other brokerages. I have friends everywhere nationwide. And every one of these stories is sad. Okay, no happy one. I'm going to share a lot of sad stories tonight. The reason why I want to share a lot of sad stories is I want to keep this extremely real. Like, can I keep this really real tonight? Can I kind of scare you a little bit? Is that cool? Wow, everybody took their cameras off. I don't know what's happening. Did I scare you already? I'm just gonna assume that you all said yes. How about that? I'm just gonna go with I don't know what to expect. All right. So story number one, and all the names I'm gonna say are, oh, thanks for the reaction, thumbs up. So all the names I'm gonna say are gonna be made up. Okay, so that way I'm not incriminating anybody also if they're on here, sorry. So the first story is this agent. She's when she was in her 4th month as an agent, attended classes, all that good stuff. She went through Ignite. She had her first buyer. Her buyer went under contract. Yay, right, celebrate. By the way, do celebrate. What ended up happening was she took her foot off the gas and got lazy. Now, it wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm lazy now, but it was more of just yes, they're under contract. I can breathe a little bit. Man, that was not an easy, but she showed them like, I don't even know how many houses they put contracts in before they went under contract. It took a while. So she was excited, so she took a breath. Unfortunately, that took a breath, lasted a few days. So what ended up happening is she missed deadlines. And we're going to talk about specific deadlines throughout this, but she missed certain deadlines. One of the deadlines she ended up missing was the inspection deadline. So she had an inspection go out, not in a timely manner, didn't review the paperwork with her client in a timely manner, and didn't get the information back to the listing agent in the amount of time that was specified on the inspection report that everybody signed. So what happens then? What ends up happening is in most states, not all, check with your broker. You're gonna hear me say this like 20 million times tonight, because there are a few states that just have some specialty rules that are different. What ended up happening was, because she missed all these deadlines, the buyer missed the chance to ask for anything regarding the inspections, any repairs or anything, and had to move forward as is. They couldn't request, I mean, she tried, she called the listing agent, was like, can we get an extension? Hey, it's up to them. They said no. They said no. So it had to move forward. And this agent had to call her buyer and apologize for her messing up. Now, all right, the good news is it did go to settlement table. The bad news is this buyer asked for her to reimburse them for the inspection. They asked for a credit. They tore her name up on social media. Like, this buyer now will never give her a referral and has done more harm than good. Right? With friends, because they were friends and family. So they're doing way more harm than good with friends and family. So when we talk about deadlines here, I cannot stress the importance of keeping track of every single deadline that you have on your contracts. And did I scare anyone yet? Oh, it's getting scarier later on. Don't worry. Did I scare anyone yet? No? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk through, let's talk through some of these timelines, right? All right, so we have contract acceptance. That means that all parties has signed everything. If something is not signed, depending on your state's rules, it's not fully under contract. Right? Everything must be signed and initialed. All right. Now, whether you are a buyer or a seller, there is most likely an inspection period unless it's being waived. Right? I know right now here in the state of Maryland, there are a lot of people waiving the inspections just to get their offer accepted. Not recommended, but they're doing it. So you have the inspection period, and then you have closing. But is that it? Let me ask all of you, is that it? Acceptance, inspection, closing.
Attorney review.
You got so depending on your state, you could have attorney review, title review. If they're working with a lender, there's all the financial documents that are being collected within here that has to be collected in a timely manner, right? Depending on depending on the state, as well as depending on if they're using lending and they're a buyer, there's an appraisal. So here's the real deal with this. When you go under contract, when that contract is accepted, not only does our job just really begin, but there's 3 points of negotiation typically in any deal, unless things are waived or it's a cash buyer. When a contract gets accepted, you negotiated to get it accepted, right? One of our agents right now put in an offer for a buyer for a house for $322. The seller came back and said, no, we want $328. The buyer came back and said, actually, they said yes to that. They said, yep, $328. The negotiations. Then you get to inspection period. All right, we're going to get an inspection done. We're going to look at the report. We're going to talk about timeline just a minute on that. We're going to look at the report. I'm going to review it with you, meaning you're my buyer, I'm your agent. We are reviewing it together. Please never just send an inspection report right to your buyer and be like, okay, let me know what you think. Just give me your thoughts on it. I don't know about every state on here, but I do know a good portion of the states on here. These inspection reports are scary. All right, they are scary. And here in Maryland, I will tell you, I don't know if the same everywhere. In the chat box, I'd love to know like what it's like in your state. An inspector has to find at least 30 things to put in their report. They are required to find 30 things. Even on like we had an inspector go out on a brand new build, beautiful home, beautiful new build. And they had to find about 30 things. I think they found like 20 some. One of them was the light panel was upside down. Like the light switch was just like the little thing you screw on had a picture on it, and the picture was upside down. Okay. It's like a seashell. It was upside down. I think another one was like the screen was something with a screen. Anyways, they have to find something. So if you just send it to the agents, or sorry, if you send it to their buyer, they're going, number one, it's gonna be scary. They're gonna be like, what in the world? And then they're going to want to do everything. Right? Now, at the end of the day, we support and we're working with our buyers, right? It's their decision, but we have to educate them. So let's talk specifically timeline. Can anybody on here share what the timeline typically is for inspections? Meaning you went under, so you are now officially have accepted contract. So today is, let's use dates. Today is June 24th. And let's say that in your contract, you wrote 10 days. Okay. So June 24th, it got accepted. And then you wrote 10 days for inspection. So what does that mean? Who on here either knows and wants to take a guess on what that means?
It means you have 10 days to do all of your inspections and turn in the inspection report and ask for repairs within that time period.
Yes, I love that. Was that Jen? Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
You have, so if it goes, if now again, disclaimer again, check with your broker in your state. Okay. I'm gonna keep saying that. When it comes to contract stuff like this, we have to say that like a million times because we record these and put them on YouTube. So, and also for your benefit. All right. So if day one's the 24th, meaning it went under contract on the 24th, and it's 10 days, day one starts the 25th. And it count, by the way, it's not business days, it's days. That means if you count from the 25th out 10 days, that brings us to July 4th. That means it's scheduling the inspector to go out. The inspector goes out. Most inspectors, depending on states, need a few days to get scheduled and go out, right? And maybe you have a great inspector go out same day, but not typically. So you have to call the inspector, have the inspector go out. The inspector then has to put the report together, which could take 24 hours to put together, to then send the report to you for you to review, to then have you send it to your buyer. So both of you talk about it together. For then your buyer to have time to think about it. Because some people want to actually think about it. Right? It's a lot to process. For your buyer to have time to think about it, to then say, nope, I'm good, let's move forward. Cool, that's the greatest thing they could say. Or they'll say, you know what? These are very critical, like emergency things, either health or safety. That's why I always say health or safety. That's what we're looking at, health or safety. So these are a few critical things I would like to request for repair. Doesn't mean they'll say yes, but we can always ask. So you have to now type up that whatever your document is called in your state, request for repair document. I'm just going to call it that. To then send to the listing agent by July 4th.
Oh, Alana, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So I'm in New York State, but I've lived in Vermont as well. But as a buyer, I always went to the inspection. And someone from the real estate whether or not my broker or my, my realtor, someone from their office went. Is that a common practice? Or you,
It is. Yeah,
okay.
it absolutely is. It's common practice to have you, the buyer there. Absolutely. Absolutely. And well, I would say that in most states, common practice. Yes.
Just
Okay.
because that kind of, you're saying don't just hand them an inspection report. I would always recommend that they go to the inspection, because if they say is this major, is this like, the inspector has a lot of information that they can share with you.
Yes. And as an agent, thank you so much. And as an agent, you want to set if they're going to the inspection, you want to set an expectation up front that, hey, listen, an inspector's job is literally to find every little nook and cranny they can find, right? They're gonna nitpick over like a mark on a white wall. All right. What we're really going to ask questions on and look at if there's anything health or safety wise, right? Something critical. Right. We'll get a report
Yeah,
afterwards. We'll
or
look at it together.
structural or something. If that's
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Something, but I consider that safety.
Dangerous.
Structural,
Dangerous.
critical, like dangerous. Exactly. Not there's, the door's screw was loose. I'll bring it.
Yeah, and I think first time home buyers are a little bit more reactionary than people that have had a couple of transactions that know what's,
So first time
Well,
homebuyer, absolutely, because they don't know what they don't know. But I would actually say most people, even if they've bought a home in the past, they don't remember.
yeah.
Been years, they don't remember. So set that expectation up front before you go. So that way they're going in there and they don't get alarmed, right? They know what they're about to say, what to expect. And they're like, oh, okay. You warned me about that. Cool. Like, I feel good, thank you for bringing that up. So let's transition we're going to get back to the timeline just a little bit and go further into that, but let's talk about who's all involved in a transaction. So we're going to do, we're not going to do a small group or partnering, because getting people in breakout rooms on this thing in the evening fails every time. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the chat box. And let's blow up the chat box with who's all involved in a transaction. Just throw in there whatever you can think of. I'll kick you off by saying you are. You can be like me. See, attorneys. By the way, some people on here, depending on your state, certain states, attorneys have to be involved. Other states, attorneys don't have to be involved. Well, except for title attorneys, right? Some states you actually need a title attorney and a real estate attorney. Title company, buyer, seller, lender. So I see buyer, seller, title company, lender, attorney, inspector, mortgage broker, transaction coordinator. Ooh, Barbara. Yes. Ooh, I need to talk about that in a second. Thank you for bringing that up. Inspector, appraiser. Yep. Okay. So I think we got most bases covered here. So obviously you, right? You're at the front end, right? Here you are. You have the co-op agent. That's your other agent on the other side. Okay. Who you want to always kill with kindness, because that other agent can also blow up a deal. Okay. If they don't like you or working with you, unfortunately, oh, yep. Story time. Sorry, guys. Another story. Here comes. All right. Oh, this one hits home. So there's an agent who, we'll call her Kara, just for a name. And Kara is working with a buyer. And sorry, scratch that. Kara's working with the seller. So Kara's working get my story all mixed up. Kara's working with the seller. What ended up happening was the agent on the other end was working with the buyer. They got under contract. Yay. Throughout under contract to closing, by the way, it never settled, fell apart. I'll share how it happened. So with what ended up happening was not only was negotiations to get under contract difficult, but then the buyer agent was sending out the inspector without notifying the listing agent to notify the seller of when they're coming. So they just popped up out of nowhere. So the seller got really angry, rightfully so. And then the Kara, the listing agent, got really angry and showed the anger in front of the seller. Myself and actually our broker had to get involved in that one to try to calm it down because he wanted to squash it right there. He's like, nope, I don't want them having this house. They don't deserve this house. We're not moving forward. He was mad. I was going to use some other words here, but we're being recorded and I can't. YouTube won't accept it then. So we saved it for a time being, move forward, inspection. They asked for some repairs. The seller, hold on, people on mute. The seller was so this agent did not prep their buyer. I'm going to say it this way. The agent did not set proper expectations with their buyer of what to ask for repairs. So this buyer asked for everything. They literally sent the report saying, we want everything. Okay. Now I know both agents on both sides. And the seller, basically that's someone, like imagine someone walks up to you and you own a home and you've lived in it for 7, 8, 11 years. And someone walks up and says, I want this 30-page thing all resolved before I buy your house. Right? Kind of like a slap in the face. So the seller got really angry. The listing agent also got angry. Notice how I keep saying that? The listing agent was showing all of their emotions to the seller. Right? You can have emotions as an agent, but don't have them with your clients. So because the listing agent showed all their emotions with their seller, it made the seller even more frustrated to where it fully blew up then. Brokers got involved, turned really ugly, never went to settlement table. They had to put it back. So the house went back in the market. I mean, it did finally sell down the road to somebody totally different. The buyers who were under contract, who are now not buying this house, were selling a house and had deadlines. So they had to find a place to live. These things happen. They are very real. We can't control other people. We can control ourselves. So the moral of that story is keep your emotions in check when things are going poorly. If you have another agent on the other end who is just not your cup of tea, I'll say that, okay, in a very nice way, kill them with kindness. Don't go to the level, just kill them with kindness, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about us, it's about the person who wants to buy this home to live in it with their family and this person who's looking to sell it for a reason, right? All right. So in a transaction, we have the other agent you're all going to play nice with. We have, even if you don't like them, you don't have to go out drinks and dinner with them. Just, be nice during the transaction. There may be a lender, right? If you're working with a buyer and stuff, you use a lender, there might be a lender, a mortgage broker, same thing. There might be an inspector if they're getting an inspection done, right? You have your buyers and sellers. You have the whole buyers. Sometimes you have the whole buyers and sellers families. Sometimes you have way more family members than you want in the mix. Right now we have a seller who is going into a nursing home and can't represent himself fully. So he has to bring in an attorney because he doesn't have any family members. It's actually very sad. He has no family members. So he has to bring an attorney to help represent him. So now it's the buyer, the seller, the buyer's attorney. Right? We have title companies, we have, title attorneys, appraisers. So when we think, oh my God, yes, contracts accepted. Oh no, that whole group of people all have to come together now on deadlines. Every one of them. Every one of them has to come together. If the lender drops the ball, falls apart. If the title company drops the ball, falls apart. Seen it time and time again. If agents can't play nice in the sandbox, it fall apart. Am I scaring you yet?
A little bit.
No, not yet. Okay. All right. So things to think about. By the way, this is in your participants guide. There's a great page and just a bunch of questions for yourself and for your buyers. What is the first thing my buyer needs? What do the buyers need to know and do? What do I need to know and do? What does the rest of the team need to know and take action on, and when? When, right? And then what are you doing at each point to bulletproof the transaction, to set yourself up and your buyers for a successful close? Now, this keeps talking about buyers, but this is interchangeable for sellers as well, right? You've working with buyers, you will absolutely have more to do. For under contract close, you have a whole thing there, a whole journey. If you're working with a seller, this is why also we say sellers are king, because it saves you a lot of time. If you're working with a seller, you're waiting for a lot of updates from the buyer's agent, excuse me. Right? And just keeping your seller updated. There's not really much you're doing, right? Lots of communication. All right, so let's get more into this timeline. Now, once again, each location's different, right? So like right here, it says earnest money buyer. We're here in the state of Maryland. This actually comes before like when it actually goes under contract, right? So a few of these items and pinpoints might move depending on where you are located, which is why I can't stress enough. Take this timeline, sit down with somebody at your location, your brokerage, who knows this, to be able to get your timeline, mapped out. And then have it available, right? Have it available. So you're giving the list of inspectors to your buyer for them to call. You have the earnest money they're depositing. Again, depending on which state, depends on when they deposit it. Informing the listing agent of your inspection schedule. Please inform the listing agent. Story I just shared is a good example of that, right? Deal fell through because there was no communication. Okay. You have the inspections and the inspection response. You got the appraisal. You have final walkthroughs. Now, the final walkthrough, why is it so crucial? What are you looking at in the final walkthrough? As an agent, you're there with your client, by the way. So you are there with your buyer. What are you looking at?
To make sure that if any repairs were supposed to have been done, that they were done, and also to make sure that it is in the condition that it needs to be in. It's not trashed, or it looks how it's supposed to look.
Yes. So to make sure any repairs, thank you. Make sure any repairs that were supposed to be done are done. And the home is being delivered and ready. And it looks the way it's supposed to look based on when you went under contract. So 2 examples of that. One, final walkthrough, agent was there with the buyer and there was no fridge. Now, when they went under contract, there was a fridge. But now it's the day before settlement and there's no fridge. The contract says there's going to be a fridge. So what ended up happening was there was a lack of communication between agents, or understanding, I guess. And the seller was not leaving the high-end fridge they had. They were going to purchase a lower-end fridge to have in the house. The buyer agent just checked off fridge and did not relay that information to their buyer. It was there, it was in writing. They didn't relay it to their buyer. So at the final walkthrough, the buyer agent had to look at their buyer and be like, yeah, I messed up. They are going to have a fridge, but it's not going to be the one you saw that you really liked with all the fancy things on it, where like it talks to you. It's going to be a lower line fridge. What do you think the buyer was? angry, frustrated. So when I ended up, it did go to settlement table the very next day. It settled on time. And then after settlement, the agent brought them to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever and bought them a fridge with their commission check. Because that was the right thing to do because they messed up. That was that agent's choice, by the way. Oh, one little point on this for final walkthrough. Really make sure you're going there with pen, paper, and you have talked to the listing agent prior to number one, if there were things that need to be completed by a licensed contractor, you're getting those reports to get proof that it was done by a licensed contractor. The other thing is you want to make sure you talk to the listing agent because they might have scheduled someone to come out and let's say replace a cracked floor, but they can't come out and replace a cracked floor for like 2 more days. So it won't be done until after settlement, right? So you don't want to walk into the house, see the cracked floor, freak out with your buyer, right? You'd rather know these things ahead of time to be like, hey, listen, I know one of the things you said was replace a cracked floor. They approved that. I talked to the listing agent. They will have that done, but the flooring people can't come out until this date. We'll get that all in writing. Don't walk into surprises because that is when your buyers are going to get frustrated and our poker faces are going to go away. Right. Communication. Lack of will absolutely end a deal. If you are not communicating deadlines to your buyer, to your seller, if you're not communicating the information to title and lending companies and sending over all the documents, if you're not in touch with your buyer to make sure all the documents are getting to the lender, if you're not talking to the lender to make sure all the documents are being sent by your buyer, don't trust the buyer that they're sending them. Double check with the lender. Like have that communication with them directly. No whisper down the line, right? Scheduling, communicating with the inspectors, the listing agent, right? Every single person along the way, every week. Yes, Kevin.
So just and this my wife dealt with most of this coming out of Alaska. So we sold our home and I worked for the DOD. So there's the DNRP, the Defense National Relocation Program. So they hire a contract company to actually sell your home in case it doesn't sell. So couple interesting facts if you ever have to deal with this. My wife as the listing agent had to deal with that company and anything that was coming from her to the buyer had to go through her. That was an interesting factor. So all of that stuff, so even though she was a listing agent, she had to work this whole thing through the company that was contracted to technically sell my home. So that's just an interesting, so that's an additional piece of the puzzle if you've never dealt with something like, and I guess civilian companies also contract like this company as well. When their employees relocate, they hire a company to do all this.
Kevin, great point you bring up, right? And one of the things I want to point out that you mentioned that I want everybody to really hear is there are no 2 deals the same. You might have a few similarities here and there, but you just never know. You really don't. You never know who's going to be involved, who you're talking to, who needs to play a part. We recently had a transaction here, a closing here. It did close, happy ending, happy story. But what ended up happening was halfway through, we thought it was going to fall apart. So it was under contract. Halfway through the closing, we thought it was going to fall apart because the buyer either forgot to mention or the listing agent didn't ask properly. We're not quite sure where the ball was dropped on this one. But they had funds they were getting from an outside source. And they needed those funds to be able to close. They weren't just using lending. And nobody knew this, not even the lender. So somebody's at fault here, who knows who. I blame them all. They're all at fault. And now settlement did need to be pushed back a good 3 weeks. Right? Because of this, they needed funding. But yeah, it almost fell through. All of a sudden, the buyer just called the agent one day and said, yeah, my funding didn't come through. The agent's like, what do you mean your funding didn't come through? We got this. Yeah. You never know. You just never know. Ask all the questions. And if you don't know what questions to ask, number one, talk to your broker, talk to your coach, talk to if they're using a lender, talk to the lender, especially if it's dealing with financing. And then the documents, right? So here's the thing, while we're communicating things, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. If it is not in writing, it doesn't exist. What does that mean? Does anybody have an example of that? Waiting for the chat.
It's kind of like it's kind of like if you eat something sweet, if no one sees you eat it, then you won't gain weight.
You know what, Barbara? I like that. I might have to go with that one. Tonight when I eat my Reese's Peanut Butter Cup when I get home, if my husband doesn't see me eat it, I never ate it. This is perfect. I'm totally using that. Thank you. So, oh, that made me laugh. I see. No, see, that exists now, Kevin. I saw your Doritos. See, now it exists. So you have communication. So let's say you call the listing agent and you're like, all right, we want these repairs done. The listing agent's like, yep, we can totally handle that. We'll get a contractor out, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have anything signed, they don't have to uphold that. They do not have to repair it. You can't go after them for it. I'm going to take this totally different route. Let's say that Barbara sends me a referral. She's a friend of Marilyn who's looking to buy a house. And I'm like, well, I'm your girl. Let me help. And I tell Barbara over the phone, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to take great care of your friend. How about a 25% referral fee? Like, absolutely. Well, if she doesn't send me something with the information and for me to sign, unless you send it through Command, because Command automatically signs it, like it's a virtual signature. If there's nothing in writing that says, here's the buyer's name, here's who I sent it to, here's the referral fee. I could be that. I'm not. But I could be that agent who never sends a referral fee. And then Barbara's wondering, like, whatever happened? And then she reaches to her broker, and her broker's like, do you have anything in writing? She says, no. Her broker will turn around and say, that's your fault. Lesson learned. Right.
That's something kind of similar. There were a lot of things, and like you said, sometimes you just don't expose the agent. And when things needed to be done, and I could not get her to give me an addendum, I just kind of had to write the addendum myself and send it and get her to sign it. So sometimes they don't respond, but you have to still, it needs to happen.
Yeah, you know what? If they don't respond, then you be the one doing it. Okay, you take the initiative, do it to get in writing. Whatever it is, whether it is an email, a text, something in writing. Okay. All right. So we went through that already. Did this literally just duplicate the slides? Oh, seller transaction, sorry. I was like, wait a minute, same slide. Can you tell it's been a long day? Seller transactions. So it does involve a little more than just you and the seller or sellers, right? There's many people bringing it to the transaction table. Now we're not going to do this activity because I'm going to give you the answer to this one. It's every single person you mentioned before. The only difference is, as the listing agent, you're not the one scheduling the inspection. You're not the one scheduling the appraisal, scheduling this, scheduling that. However, you are the ones who want to communicate with the title company as well. Don't just put that on the buyer agent. You also, depending on what state you're in, you also want to communicate with that lender of that buyer agent. You don't want to just take the word of the whisper down the lane effect of, The agent talked to their buyer, who talked to the lender, who now gets to talk to you, who you get to talk to the seller. I'm picking up the phone, I'm calling that lender. Right? I want to make sure we're on track. I want to make sure things are looking good financially. Right? So I can reassure the seller. Right? Because what your job is in this scenario is your job is to over communicate. Here's the thing, your seller is going to be scared. I don't care if they sold the house once, twice, 3 times. They're going to be nervous. They're going to be nervous something's going to go wrong. And when they don't hear from you, even if it's hearing from you in a text being like, talk to the buyer agent, all still good. Right? Even if, so if they don't hear from you, what ends up happening is they start forming negative thoughts. Right? So what's really cool about right here, what's the first thing a seller needs to know, needs to do? In that listing presentation in Command Designs, we're not going to go into Command tonight because that's a whole nother night. But in Command Designs, a listing presentation, there's actually a list of the process that you can give to the seller that talks about these things. Okay. Now, I do want to take a step back for a minute. Actually, I'm going to do it on the screen. What is another way? So we talked about inspection causing things to fall through, appraisals, agents not getting along. What could also cause a transaction to not get to the closing table with your buyer, specifically buyer? And it's not on the screen.
They bought a car before closing.
Yes. I don't know who just said that, but yes, that's yep.
Car, quad.
They bought something. They opened a credit card. They bought that new furniture set. They opened a credit card at the furniture store, bought that new furniture set for their new house before closing. Right. So I told you there's a bunch of sad stories tonight. So here's story number, I don't know what. So we're going to call this agent Mark. All right. So Mark been in business like 32 years. And he had a buyer, he was working with the buyers. They were on their honeymoon. They were coming back, and 2 weeks after coming back, they were settling on this new home they're gonna start their life in. Beautiful story. Beautiful. Not so bad, not so beautiful ending. While they're away, Mark learned, because he was communicating with the lender, right? Not so much communicating with the buyers, they were on their honeymoon, but he was communicating with the lender, bunch of things. The buyer, before going on their honeymoon, number one, they charged their entire honeymoon on a credit card and bought a new car and bought new furniture for their new house. And their credit was already like kind of on the cusp. Okay. Didn't have like extra, right? First home buyers, and he talked to the lender and they were no longer approved. Financing fell through. So he had to actually make the call to his buyers and tell them this. And tell these buyers, well, first he's like, all right, who do you know that has money that you can just borrow? Like, all right, who do we know? Like, think of every relative you can possibly go to. They didn't, like, there was nobody in their family they could just turn to. So they came back to no home. No home. Yep. Now, how can you prevent that? So there's something, how as an agent can you try your best to prevent that? What are things you can do?
You have to communicate that up front. When the whole thing starts, and even before you go under contract, when you have your buyer's presentation booklet, cover that. Say, hey, when we go to enter into contract, when we come under contract, do not buy anything that's a large ticket item. Like don't pre-buy if you want to get this for the house. Buy nothing. Don't buy a new car. Don't finish out your honeymoon. All of a sudden you figure, oh, I'm going to have a windfall. Oh, I'm going to pay my kids $15,000 off in credit card debt on my credit card. Don't do any of that. Make no major financial movements when we're under contract. When we close, do whatever you want.
So Kevin, spot on. Set that expectation from the first meeting. Even before you start showing houses. At that buyer strategy session, set that expectation. And then remind them of that right when you go under contract. The second it gets accepted. Oh my God, Kevin, I'm so excited. You're under they sign, we're under contract. Listen, we're not handing over keys yet, but I want to go through and reset some expectations with you. All right. I just want to go through and make sure we're on the same page of what to expect next, what will happen, and what not to do. Do you have a pen and paper? That's why I say to the buyer, do you have a pen and paper? Right. I'll make them write it down. Right. So now you're so you're doing two things. The contract got accepted. So now you're congratulating them. They're excited. You're letting them know, hey, there's now a timeline and deadlines in place. Let me talk to you about that. This is what it's going to look like. This is what to expect. Take your time with this. Don't rush it. Really educate. Make sure they understand it. Make sure they feel okay with what you're saying, right? Do some check-ins. And then say, and here's a bunch of do nots. There's actually a great graphic in Designs. You can also Google it. There's tons online of do's and don'ts for buyers. And it has a whole don'ts section of don't buy a car, don't do this, don't open a credit card, right? And even if you think these people are just loaded, man, they got like the Bentley, all right, they got Mercedes, they got their Audi, like, come on. They're good. I don't need to tell them these things. They have plenty of money. That's the person who's going to fall through. Okay. My husband's best friend was buying a house with his wife, first time home buyer. And I was representing them. It was new build. And I know the wife very well. And I knew she would want everything new. And they have very, very well-to-do government jobs. I'm just going to say that way. They're doing all right. So they can afford all new furniture and all new this, right? But I absolutely sat them down. The second they signed with that new build, we went out to lunch and I'm like, all right, listen. And I looked at her specifically and I'm like, you know, all those things that are in your cart that you want to buy with this and this and this? I was like, you cannot press the purchase button in any way, shape, or form until we're sitting at the settlement table and you're done. You have the keys. We are done. You own the house. Then click purchase. Right? On that day, click purchase for the very next day. So no matter who the person is, friend, family, well-to-do, not, doesn't matter. That's probably the majority of your deals falling through will actually be from you forgetting to do that.
I have a question about that, actually. Is there a specific time frame? You know, some people prepare to buy a house for a long, long time. Is there a specific time frame that you recommend, you know, to stay away from buying anything on credit prior to purchasing a house?
I would say as soon as they talk to the lender and get pre-approved to figure out where their credit falls, right then and there. Because if you talk to, let's say that you're my buyer right now, and we're just having a conversation, I'm learning about what you want and, you know, the reasons you want it and everything. And then we're just kind of, I'm sending you some homes and you go and I don't know your financial situation today, but let's say you talk to the lender tomorrow. And tomorrow the lender says, your credit score is this, you're pre-qualified for this. If you all of a sudden start purchasing things, opening credit cards, doing things, it will change. All right. So I would say that's a great question. me personally, I don't know if anybody else on here has guidance. I personally would say right when they talk to a lender. Now, here's the thing, if you know someone wants to buy, let's say you're talking to someone who's renting right now and they are longing to buy. They've been wanting to buy for years, but they had work to do. They had to find steady jobs or build their credit or whatever the case may be. And you're helping them through that, right? You're following up with them, you're helping them through. I would actually say it way earlier with them, right? If you're my renter today and you're saying that you want to get yourself in a position to buy next year, number one, I'm connecting you to a lender right now, not to buy tomorrow, but just for educational purposes, for you to know where your starting point is, right? I call it to know what your buying power is. Right? And then we're going to sit down and talk so I can learn, whether on Zoom or in person, whatever, but I want to learn a little bit more about what does that look like in the future. So that way I can sit and have some expectations. Hey, listen, to really line yourself up for that, for next March is what I heard you say, like March, April. You're on the right track from what you're saying, the lender's saying. So don't open credit cards. Don't close any credit cards, right? Don't rack up any big bills. Like kind of just go through it now, because now you're setting them up. You're really providing a value. Now you're really guiding them to home ownership for that time they'll be ready.
Yeah, so the sooner they talk to actually a professional, the better they can prepare for the process.
Absolutely. A
And if it's-
professional a professional is not there to say, hey, great, you're pre-approved for this. Let's go see talk to your agent, go see a house and buy it. The professional is there when
To
you talk,
advise.
when you talk to the right one, to advise, right? To guide, to educate. Yeah, great question. And so similar thing as the buyers with sellers, you have a lot of communication. Your communication, if you notice on the buyer slide, there was two parts to it. On the seller side, it's a little less, because who you're talking to is you're talking to the seller to let them know the deadlines of, hey, the inspector's coming out on this day. We're on track for settlement on this day. Right? There's nothing you actually need to do there other than communicate the deadlines or like what's occurring. You're also, if they need anything prior to moving, right? Do they need contractors, movers, cleaners? Don't forget, it's not on here, but I'll put it in here. Don't forget the little things, right? Giving your seller a list, actually a great list to have for your buyer and seller is, for your seller, a list of things they have to turn off by a certain date or transfer, right? Electric, cable. If someone has a landline these days, I don't even know, but what do they have, right? If, also if they're moving on a certain day, they need to schedule the mover. They can't forget to schedule a mover and then you have settlement today, right? And then all of a sudden the buyers have the keys and they're like, oh shoot, I forgot to move all my stuff, right? So guide them along this path. Don't think that they know, because guess what? They don't know. They don't. They forget, they get busy. They do not know these things, right? Obviously cleaners, steam cleaners, etc. Title company, we talked about that. And then of course, scheduling everything just with that buyer's agent, making sure you are on the same page with that buyer agent, just in tandem. Kevin.
So somebody, whether you have a buyer or a seller, and if you have your rural buyers, somebody that knows well in septic is probably really good to have in your portfolio of people to recommend.
Oh, well, if
Well
you
in
are
septic.
if you are in an area with that, absolutely. Here's the thing, you want to, as an agent, you want to build a network list, a resource list, right? Who's your mover you're going to refer out? Who's a cleaner? Who's a contractor? Who's a well and septic? Who's a plumber, a handyman, a painter, right? If you don't know anyone that you would refer, Most likely there's a top producer in your office or a bunch of them. Just ask them. They'll tell you people. Right? Just make sure when you refer them, you give the little disclaimer of, hey, here's a mover if you need it, or you can use whoever you want. You know, they're not attached to me. They're not my partner. You know, I just refer them from time to time. That way, if the mover breaks something, they're not calling you saying, why'd you give me that mover? That's happened. So same exact thing with the seller. Document, document, document. If you are the listing agent and let's say that your seller agreed to extend the inspection period, put that in writing. Let's say that they agreed to, that they're going to last minute fix the garage door. Put that in writing. Because even though you are representing the seller and the seller may say to you, oh yeah, we've no problem. We're going to have a person out tomorrow to fix the garage door. Like we're good. So you call the buyer agent like, oh, hey, Maria, great news. Seller's going to be fixing that garage door. And Maria's calling the buyer saying, hey, they're going to fix the garage door. So everybody's just talk to everybody. They're fixing the garage door. And then the seller forgets to call someone. And last minute decides, yeah, never mind. I don't feel like fixing the garage door. Well, now, if that's not in writing, not only is the buyer upset, buyer agent upset, but now you're like, you know, tail between the legs, like, yep, what happened there? Is a little thing we didn't slow down. And that's the thing, a lot of times we don't do this as an let me phrase this. Some agents, not any of you, none of you are going to do this, but some agents out there don't slow down enough to put something in writing. They'll think about it, they'll think about doing it, but then they just move on to the next thing. And they're like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. Do not use the phrase, it will be fine. It won't be. It won't be. Okay. So we're not going to talk about command in this class, but just know that this coming Wednesday and Thursday are both back-to-back specialty command classes with national tech trainers to tie in getting to the closing table with command. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about best practices and risk avoidance. We already kind of talked a little bit about this. So some of this will be reiterating, but let's go into a little more detail here. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about setting expectations up front. Number 2, setting expectations up front. So we talked about setting expectations as far as, you know, don't be spending money, opening credit cards, etc. What are their expectations? Let's kind of go through a list here. Let's do a little activity in the chat box. What are all the different expectations we should be setting up front? I'm going to hang out in the chat box here and see what we say. Things can change. Yep. Now, as a buyer, that's confusing. So I would just say, things can change. Here are some examples. Oh, I love that. Communication preferences. Absolutely. By the way, whose communication preferences do we follow? Ours or theirs? Thank you. Theirs. Again, we don't matter. It's them, right? What else? What other expectations are we setting up front? We got the things can change, but what else is there? Don't go spending money, opening credit cards, using credit cards. Pay your bills on time. Like, don't miss a credit card pay, if they're paying their credit card down, don't miss a payment. Right? Property access negotiation process, absolutely. Inspector availability during a high season. Oh, that's a good one. Yep. Oh yeah, that's a really good one. What else? Be any inspector. Yeah, so letting them know what to inspect from the inspector, let him know what the appraiser does. Right? I'll add this in. I know I said this a little bit ago, but let me say it again. Letting them know that the job isn't done. Right? The job is not done. Not until they sign all the documents and the keys are handed over. One thing I'm going to add to here, I don't see it on here yet. Oh, I'll do it like this. Potential roadblocks during the transaction. Yes. By the way, you're not saying potential roadblocks during the transaction to scare them. You're not being like, oh my God, there's going to be roadblocks. You're saying the roadblocks to put their mind actually at ease. And listen, just so you know, during this process, there's going to be some roadblocks that pop up. Here's some examples of a few. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to navigate them with you the entire way. Right? Make sure they feel comfortable as you go through that. Upfront costs. Absolutely. What are their upfront costs? How much is it going to cost them for inspections and this and that? And, you know, what, talking to the lender, what could be their closing costs? What are they going to need to bring to the settlement table? Make sure they know that way up front. You do not want your buyer or seller being surprised day of settlement. Oh, hey, I know settlement's in 3 hours. Do you have that check for $8,000 ready? That is not the conversation you want to be having on settlement day. Right? Title search shadows. I'll add in here, yeah, that there's ongoing negotiations. Absolutely. Oh, these are good. Now we're rocking and rolling. I love this. People just had to think for a minute, I guess. One thing I'm going to add in here is the expectation that while you're going to do everything in your power to help them sit across that table and get those keys and get into that house, sometimes things happen in life. And that you're going to be there for every step of the way with them. Right? It's a hard conversation to have because nobody wants to hear that. But again, you don't want any surprises. You don't want that person looking at you going, what in the world? Right? All right. Being proactive. I think we've said the word timeline like 20 times tonight, if not more. Where is the deal at risk of falling apart? What are the best practices to keep the deal alive? Right? An expectation that was not put in the chat box that I'll throw out here. If they're working with a lender, set the expectation from the moment you start showing houses. You're not even contract accept yet, not even under contract. The moment you start showing houses and they've already talked to a lender and they're pre-approved, because why would you show a house to someone not pre-approved? That's a waste of time, unless they're cash, and then go right ahead. You're setting the expectation that when the contract gets accepted, there is going to be a number of things the lender will need from them to finalize everything financially. Unless they happen to have done all that prior, which some states do, not Maryland. So I can't talk about our state. We don't do that. I mean, I guess the lender can do that. We just don't. There's certain states that do everything up front while they're getting that pre-approval, pre-qualification with the lender. But yeah, letting the agent know, or letting the buyer know, like, hey, when you get under contract, we find the right house for you. There's going to be deadlines for you to get things to the lender, and talk to the lender. Make sure they have a list of everything they're going to need so they can start gathering them. Right? They start gathering their W-2s and their tax forms and all the different documents they need. Right? Get that list up front so they can start working on it. So when they do go under contract, they already have that list. They're ready to go. They can get to the lender faster, which now moves things faster for you and for them. So again, just looking at this throughout the entire thing, saying what's at risk. Always act in the client's best interest, even when it seems to be conflicted with your own. So what could be an example of that? What could be an example of acting in the client's best interest, even when it conflicts with our own? What do you guys think?
Like you said, the one agent, owning your mistake. If it's your shortcoming, don't let it become the buyer, or if you're listing something, the buyer or the seller's problem, it needs to become your problem.
I love that. Yep. That's buyer's best interest, not our own. Right? Absolutely. I'll give you two other examples. One is, now I'm going to say this, but first let me say this is number one, state specific legalities, but number two, up to the agent. So I'm just going to share best practice, and then it's your business, you decide. So this agent was working with a buyer, got under contract, getting close to settlement, and there was a repair the seller didn't want to do. And the buyer really wanted this one repair done, or they were walking. So I'm talking to the agent and I'm like, well, how much does this actually cost? Like, what does this repair cost? It was $500, give or take some change. Okay. The commission check on this was probably somewhere in the 12,000 range. So the agent, oh, she fought me on this one. I looked at the agent, I'm like, listen, this is, I coached the agent. So I was like, this is your deal. I do not tell you what to do. I share options. That's it. Suggestions and options, and you decide. I said, you can either start from scratch, start showing them some more houses. They're going to have issues again, inspections again, repairs, who knows what. Start over. Or you pay for the repair. You take care of it. It's $500. It's going to be $500. This buyer has looked at 20 million houses. They love this one. It means they get in the house they love. You're still walking away with a nice, pretty chunk of change for, let's face it, opening some doors and making some calls. Okay. Okay, it's way more than that. This agent did a lot. This agent did a lot. It's 500. The agent fought me on it. I'm like, I'm not fighting you with it. I'm just saying, you know, what do you want to do? So in that instance, the agent acted in their own business interest, did not step up and do that. Buyer fired them, hired some other agent, went whatever route they went. So that was not working in the client's best interest. Okay. Another situation that you will come across is we had an agent recently who had a buyer. Actually, there was an agent's very first buyer, brand new agent. She was 2 months in. Very first buyer went under contract and got to inspection time. That the house came back with some pretty severe structural things and more, and then some. So obviously they wanted to request a whole bunch of things, but there was no way this seller was doing, like, we talked to the listing agent, there was no way they were doing anything. And that's how, I mean, the buyer moving in was with young kids, and it was a safety hazard. This house was not good. Right. And the buyer didn't have extra money to just chunk in $10,000-$15,000 to fix it all when they moved in. So in that scenario, the agent had a choice: either move forward with their buyer in talking about this house, so the agent could, get to the closing table, or say to the buyer, this might not be the house for you. I have already looked online. I have these 3 things lined up for showings. What do you say we start showing? Well, what do you say we start looking at houses again? Now, this agent went that route. They went out, this fell apart. They went out, started looking at houses again. And to be honest, that was absolutely the best thing for that buyer. Right? That house was just not safe. When you hear those stories, when you hear like some of those things, like, what do you take from that? What is something you can take from that and think about for your business?
Your reputation is, that's going to improve your reputation. You can just take everything for the money and just try and get to the close, but it may bite you in the other end.
Yeah, we are only as good as our name. That's it. That is all we have. Once our name is tarnished, you can't get it back. There's an agent I know, she is not with us. There's an agent I know in our state who tarnished her name pretty poorly back in 2016. And I never use a name, but I use her as one of the worst agent examples around. And everybody knows her name as one of the worst agents around. I don't even know how she's still in the business. No idea. There's a question in the chat box I want to get to, and it's, if the agent starts to handle repairs, let the other seller rely on the agent to fix the repairs. What do you think? Whoever asked that, are you able to come off of mute? I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly. So if I hear it correctly, is it, if the agent starts handling the repairs, the seller might be relying on them for all the repairs? I'm going to assume that's what it says.
I won't say if we are as agents start to handle the repair as what he did or what she did, and say like this is $500, so I will gain like 11,000, so it doesn't matter like this. So maybe the other sellers will know and will not fix the repairs, and it will be like all on agent's shoulder in the future.
So you bring up a good point. You do. And I mean, people talk, but at the end of the day, I actually have I seen that happen before? Now I'm trying to think about that. So if we are working with a lot of friends and family, and they are our buyers and sellers, our friends and family will talk. Even if we're like, hey, they're going to talk.
Yeah, even if you get referral from a friend also, if you feel if you sell for this guy, even you don't know him, then you get referral from this one, and it will have the same situation. So they will talk to each other. Okay, don't fix this repair. I know this agent. He will fix it like this. So I guess it will affect.
I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, if it's right for that person, and if it's right for if it's in the best interest of your client, then that's what you do. And if you do come across a scenario where you're working with, let's say this was a neighbor and your other neighbor found out about it, and you start working with that neighbor to sell their house, and that neighbor's like, well, hey, I heard that you paid all, you did this. You simply have to set the expectations up front. You kind of have to nip that in the bud in that conversation. Like, listen, there is an extenuating circumstance. I did not pay for all the repairs. Right? There was a situation that occurred that the buyer wasn't going to get the house without. So I had to work in the buyer's best interest for this. Right? As well as the seller's best interest as well.
Okay.
Right?
Okay,
So
thank you.
it's saying the expectation. And again, at the end of the day, we do what's in the best interest for the client and protect ourselves and everything in writing. Can't stress that enough.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question. So we have our timelines. We went under contract. We talked to them all about don't do this, risk, kind of scare them a little bit, right? When you get to the settlement table, are you done? Is that it? Wipe my hands of this person, right? Kevin and Maria, my buyers just bought a house today. I am good to go. Woo, on to the next.
No, work on that, keep that pipeline going, keep in contact. Find out how things went. Look at hey, how's that house going? I heard you were gonna have a big old, you wanted to get the deck finished. Is the deck finished? Whatever.
I love that you said it. Keep the contact going, keep the relationship going. Right? Number one, all right, so there's 2 times. There's more than 2, but I'm going to specify 2. Oh, look, there's balloons when you hold up fingers. Never knew that. When are your buyers or sellers the most excited? What 2 moments?
Maybe when they sign and when they get the keys.
When they sign, meaning which part? So when they get the keys, absolutely.
Their agreement gets accepted, or when their offer gets accepted, I should say.
Yes, Alex, absolutely. So when it gets accepted and when they get the keys. So when they love you, okay? Those are the 2 moments they love you the most. You are like the greatest thing, all right? So when do you think the 2 moments are that you should be asking for referrals?
Both of those times.
When they love you the most, right? So when that gets accepted, there is nothing wrong with saying to a person, hey, you know this feeling you're having right now? Like, Alex, you're excited. Like, I'm excited for you. Journey's not over. We gotta get to the settlement, but I am excited. God, this is great. I gotta ask, man, who else do you know that I can help out with this feeling? Right? Just ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. Nothing bad will ever happen. Right? And then settlement table, same thing. Same thing. There's the thing. When you look at client reviews, wait, hold on. Before I get to client reviews, are those the only 2 times you ever asked this person for a referral? So your buyer, seller, whoever it is that the only time you ask them?
No. Whenever you can come up with an idea to ask them.
Yeah. What? Why only ask them then? Why are you not making a home anniversary call to them? There's a home anniversary smart planning command that you can just use. It reminds you, right? Send them a card, drop off a basket, whatever. So you have home anniversary you can ask. You have literally anytime you think of it throughout the year. Right? It could be quarterly if you wanted to. If you're not doing it once a year, though, that's a problem. And then client reviews. Now, there's a little discrepancy on client reviews. It's interesting when I talk to agents because every agent does this a little bit differently. So I'm going to share some best practices of this. You choose what you feel is best for you, like what sits best. So one best practice is you go and you have, they get that the contract accepted. So they're at a high right now. Like they are at their highest moment when that gets accepted. Especially if you've seen house after house and you've had offers not accepted, right? Even the seller, when all of a sudden they get the amount they want and they're like, "Whoo, all right, this is great. I'm moving." Right? Some people go right then and there and they're like, "Hey, listen, I know we're not done yet. We haven't gotten the keys yet. We haven't gotten settlement yet, but I would love, I work off of friends, family, repeat business, who people know. That's how, referrals are the lifeblood of my business. I would love a review from you, which is a quick testimonial. Here, you know what? I'm going to text you a link right now. You can fill it out right now. We're sitting together. I bought a car a few years ago. And when you buy a car like brand new, the dealership person like kind of walks you through the car a little bit before you drive it off the lot. Like, how do you access this? How do the gadgets work in this car, right? Different things. This salesperson was brilliant. So much so that I've tried many times to try to talk him into getting in real estate. Many times. I think I literally call him like every 6 months, try to get him into real estate. Be an amazing real estate agent. And what he did was brilliant is he's literally sitting in the passenger seat while I'm adjusting my mirrors and seat. We are in the car together. All right. I can't even drive it off the lot because he's in my car. And he's walking me through how to connect my Bluetooth, and I have a big screen and all the buttons on the screen because it's, I don't know, so many buttons in my car. And as he's doing that, he goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, while I have you here," and I'm like, "What do you mean while you have me here? I'm trying to go home. Like, I've been here for 8 hours. Let me go home." He goes, "While I have you here, I just sent you a text. Did you get it?" And I'm like, I don't know. Hold on. And I clicked it. I was like, "Oh yeah, I got it. Can you open that? I just want to make sure it opens." Yeah, okay. Yeah, it opened. Now, being in real estate, knowing reviews, the second I saw it, I'm like, "Oh, that was slick. Like, I like what you did there." Because the second I clicked on it, it popped open a Google review. Okay. And a little rate me button, the little star thing. And he goes, "Hey, just really quick before I hop out of this car and let you get home and enjoy dinner and all of that." He's like, "Do you mind just leave me a quick review? I love 5 stars." He's in my car. I had to leave a review. He wouldn't get out without it. Right. And he's sitting there. So I don't want to be like, now granted, he was worth 5 stars, but I didn't want to be like 1 and right. So find a place. The other time you can do it is obviously settlement table. The only thing I find with settlement table is they're so excited to get, number one, they sit there for an hour and it's exhausting signing paperwork sometimes. All right. An hour, depending on what state you live in. So when they're done and they get the keys, they want to take a picture and leave. So it's not always the opportune time. And then when you try to send it afterwards, it's all said and done. It's done. You're not on their mind anymore. I'm sorry. They're thinking about how they're redecorating and painting the walls and the moving boxes and the moving furniture and how something broke. Right. So I do recommend trying to get that review early on. All right. Questions on repeat referral business? By the way, whatever client you are not working with. So if you have the buyer, settlement's over, what is the seller? And where do they go?
Potential client, if you can work it, because they're no longer under agreement with that realtor.
Yep.
So maybe through the whole thing, they understood your negotiation skills might have been a little bit better than theirs. Agents.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Your seller just sold a house. You have all their contact information. So it should go into your system, right? Me personally, I'm probably gonna recommendation, call them in 2 weeks. Call them in 2 weeks. Be like, "Hey, it was so nice meeting you." Or if you I know sometimes settlements are like buyers on one day, sellers on another day signing, but it doesn't matter. Hey, it was so great doing the transaction with you. My buyers love that house. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And if there's anything you need, you know, in the future, please think of me. I'll make sure, what's your email? I'll make sure you have all my information. By the way, remind me again, where did you move to? Do you mind if I get your address? Right. So you're capturing information. You're seeing, hey, how did your move go? Just come from curiosity. Come from curiosity. How did your move go? Are you all moved in yet? Okay. How's the unpacking going? I know that can take a while, right? Get them to just talk. You're not looking for business because they just bought a house. They're not buying another one unless they're investing. Never know. They might be. You're looking to build a mini rapport with them. So that way you can keep that going over the months and the years with holiday cards and check-ins and ask for referrals in the future. Home anniversary, you know when their home anniversary is too, right? It is these tiny little things that set the top 20% of the agents in the nation. So there's a stat, the 20% of the agents nationwide do 80% of the business. And it's because, number one, they're not reinventing any wheels, okay? They're not trying to get all like, ooh, I can do this better than like all the people who've proven it. They are building, they talk to enough people, they build enough relationships, and they stay in contact after transactions. One of our agents literally had 7 closings with one buyer over a period of years. And it was because they helped them buy a house. 4 years later, they helped them sell it. A few years after that, they helped their son or daughter, I'll just say child, buy a house, their first home. They helped their cousin buy something. They helped this first buyer, or we'll call them the original, sell again because now they need to downsize because all the kids moved out. Like, when you stay in relationship, when you do such an exceptional job with this part of it, getting a closing table, they will remember you. And when you stay in relationship with them, lifelong business. All right. What is one thing you're going to implement from what we just walked through? So we just walked through referrals, right? And reviews. What's one thing you heard that you're like, oh, I made a note of that. I started. I need to do that.
Getting that review, like when they said the prior to, after the closing or during the closing. So maybe it's during the walkthrough or it's sometime, you know, everything's good. You got the clear to close. You've got all that information. You can say, hey, you know, we're closing next Tuesday. How about, can I get you to fill this out, send them the link or whatever.
Love that. Send them
Thinking
the
too.
link.
I was thinking about the last thing that you said when it came to I believe you were saying to keep in contact with the seller and see where they moved to. So I had never thought of that. That was the first time I've heard that.
Excellent. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, you just gained another future potential piece of business because the likelihood of that other agent actually staying in contact is, I forget the most recent, there was an actual, every year the numbers come out, like the researchers do numbers, and there was a most recent stat that came out. I think it was like this month, and I am not remembering the number, so I'm going to guesstimate. Okay. But it's about maybe 9% stay in touch, 12% stay in touch.
I like the idea of celebrating the home anniversary. Also, this is to remind them also for referrals. So I like this idea too.
For the home, yes, home anniversary. And that's the thing, like you have so many different ways to stay in touch with these people, right? So
Yeah.
if you go and I'm pulling up a different screen here in a second. If you go and you're like, I don't know what to say to anybody. I don't know what to communicate with. I don't know how to follow up with them. Number one, if you're using command, there's automation in there for you. Birthdays, home anniversaries, holiday things, random National Donut Day, like tons of things, resource pages, right? That isn't, by the way, that is another great value add, right? We always want to come from value. Everything we do come from value, come from contribution. So if you think about a resource page, and we talked about this a minute ago, and it was drawing a blank of the words right here, but the plumber, the painter, the roofer, the landscaper, the handyman, et cetera, right? When you go, you get that contract accepted. You get that all the way through to closing. Or if your market center or locally has an amazing transaction coordinator to pay and leverage to do this, I cannot highly recommend that enough. We have one in Maryland. We have one right here in our location. We have a company. And what a transaction coordinator does is the second you get a buyer under contract, they take all that work off your plate. You still have to communicate with your client. Communication is still there, it's still key. But their scheduling inspections are doing the scheduling appraisals, the title company, the lenders, all of that stuff is like 20 hours worth of work that they are taking on that we don't have to do to get it to closing. Right? And they're professional at it. So I remember the first time I ever used a transaction coordinator for one of my closings. I thought I was kind of like jipping the system. I was like, oh my God, no, like I should be doing this. Like they're paying me, I should be doing this. And the first time I used it, I was going on vacation, so I needed to. And that's it. Second you use one, as long as they're good, you'll never want to take that on again. It's good to know. You always want to know the process yourself because you never know when you're going to need to. Right? All right. What I'd like to do right now is two things. One, we have some time. So I want to really open this up we are in the last, I said this in the beginning, but I say it again. We're in the last week of Ignite. So while all of you are helping me, thank you, keep my KWU certification. To be able to keep it, we have to get so many surveys per year. So if you go to kwueval.com on your phone, computer, wherever you want to do it. I usually do it on my phone. It's easy. You put in your region. In the drop-down list, it should be Ignite, Get to the Close. In the instructor name drop-down list, it's IL. Capitals look like two L's. It's IL. I love all your feedback. 4s and 5s are my favorite. Just saying, but I love all your feedback. So while you were doing that, and I really appreciate all of you for this, I want to just kind of open it up for a little Q&A, right? So tonight we talked a lot about the timeline, right? And your homework assignment, by the way, again, sit down with somebody before the end of, I'm going to say over the next week, try to schedule time with somebody at your brokerage, a top producer, your broker. I recommend your broker or coach, to map out in writing what a timeline is for a buyer and a seller. So you have something tangible that you don't have to guess it every time. Let's open this up. Some Q&A, things you're going to implement, or even just additional questions you might have, whether on tonight's topic or just anything in general. You're all really focused on the survey and I appreciate that.
I had one earlier and I forgot what it is. Okay, let me think.
It's a long day. I get it. It's gonna come to you the second we get off this Ignite, and if it does, shoot me an email, I'll answer it.
Okay, I think it had to do with the transaction coordinator. And I guess they're different everywhere. You spoke about maybe using someone who did you speak about? I think you did about using someone who can actually keep up. I think that it does it in command, for you, but I'm not sure. But were you saying that there is possibility that you can find someone who actually does that for you?
Yeah, who actually takes when it goes under contract, gets it all the way to close for you?
Yeah,
I
gets it all the way to close, but then also does communication. I think there are sometimes places you can go to get cards sent out periodically.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not
so
sure I'm not sure what they are, but I do think there was something like that.
yeah, so there's two things that I'm hearing here. The first one is leveraging a person who is a professional transaction coordinator who can take it from contract acceptance to the settlement table and scheduling all those things in their inspections, title, lender, all of that, right? I would if you don't know someone, I would ask somebody at your market center if they're aware of somebody. The second, from what you said, is there's a lot of leverage companies out there. I'm gonna say it this way. There's so many who will love to take your money. Okay. There's so many of them who will love to take your money, but don't do a great job. So whatever you look up, just do your research on them, look up reviews on them. There's a reviews thing again. I know there's a card company and I'm forgetting the name. I want to say it's AM Cards. I'm going to look it up. And when I send out this week's, I'm behind the recordings. When I send last week's recordings, I will put in there the card company because there is one that actually, you can give
That
them.
sounds familiar.
information.
AM cards sounds familiar.
Yeah,
That probably is right.
yeah, they'll do a lot of cards. It's great. I actually have a card hanging on my wall that somebody sent me, and I'm like, hey, that's an automated card that I got. Like the company does automation for you of card sending, which is really nice. But yeah, there's tons of, there's places that will do automatic social media stuff for you, automatic marketing, automated, like you name it, there is a company for everything. The question is, what are we, time versus money, right? How much time do we have to put into something? How much money and what rate of return are we going to get on the money? If you do decide, so I'm a big fan of lead with revenue. We're not making money, don't spend money. And at the same time, if you're working a second job or another job, by the way, real estate's a job and another job, right? Our time is limited. So if you're like, I really want to do this one thing right here consistently, and I know time-wise that just not works, and I have the funds to invest in that, then try it. Just track it. Meaning don't just throw money at something and just let it go. And kind of like a gym membership where sometimes we'll join a gym and then like 3 years later, we never went. We're like, oh my God, I'm still paying for that gym. Or maybe that's just me with that experience. I don't know. I went once, maybe twice. All right, let me check the chat box here. Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. amcards.com. Yep. Yes, tracking that rate of return, absolutely. All right. Listen, were there any other questions before we pop off for the night? No? All right. tomorrow night is, so again, this week is the final week of Ignite. You have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tomorrow night is the planning your future. That's actually a really fun one. It's like putting everything together into a pretty little package. Usually gets everybody extremely like inspired. Then Wednesday and Thursday are specialty technology classes, right? Solely tied into this week's topic.
Did you say these are on YouTube? These classes are posted on YouTube?
They are. They're not posted until usually a week after because I have to download them, edit them, upload them. It's a whole thing. So last week classes are not on YouTube yet because I haven't done it. Full disclosure. I went to the Barnes & Nobles yesterday to do it. Their Wi-Fi didn't work, so next thing you know, I'm watching House of Dragons, so you know, it just didn't happen. But it will. It will by Wednesday at the latest. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing the survey. I really appreciate all of you and have a great night.
Thanks, Alana.
Bye, everyone.